In this video from ITFreeTraining, I will look at the three different interfaces that are available in Windows Server 2012. Previously, with Windows Server 2008, you had the choice of full or server core. With Windows Server 2012, you also have the option to use a new interface called the minimal interface. The minimal interface gives the administrator more options than server core and less than a full GUI, so is somewhere in between. Shown here are the screenshots of the three different interfaces. Which interface is right for you will depend on what your needs are. The full GUI interface uses the most resources on the computer, but you have access to all the features of Windows Server 2012 and can run any software designed to run on Windows Server 2012. The minimal interface reduces the resources used on the computer by removing some of the graphical components, but not all of them. For example, you can still run Server Manager. However, the taskbar and some of the control panel functions have been removed. This allows you to run more graphical intensive applications than Server Core, but not all graphical interfaces are supported. This helps reduce the amount of CPU and RAM required by the server without completely removing all its ability to run graphical applications. Most noticeably, being able to run Server Manager makes the server a lot easier to administer than having to do this from the command line like in Server Core. The last interface is Server Core. Server Core uses the least amount of CPU and memory. Only the most basic graphical applications, such as Notepad, can be run in Server Core. The good news is that you can change interface at any time. All you need to do is add the required features to the operating system and reboot the computer. You are no longer locked into a particular interface like in Windows Server 2008 and require a complete reinstall of the operating system if you change your mind. Listed here are the core features that are available in each interface. The command prompt, Windows PowerShell, and .NET are available in all interfaces. More advanced administration, such as Server Manager and Microsoft Management Console, require at least the minimal interface. If you are running the minimal interface, you have access to some of the applets in the control panel. This will not give you access to the control panel itself, only some applets in the control panel. If you want to access everything in the control panel, you will need the full interface. Lastly, if you want features like Windows Explorer, Internet Explorer, and the built-in help system, you will need the full GUI interface. This covers the core apps, but in a lot of cases, you will want to install roles on the server to provide services to your clients. With Windows Server 2012, Microsoft has increased the number of roles that are supported by Server Core. Shown here are the roles that are not supported by Server Core. At the top is Active Directory Federation Services. You will notice that Active Directory Domain Services is not listed. If you want to configure a domain controller to run on Server Core, you are now able to do so. The application server role is often installed when custom applications are created by the company and installed on the server. It provides additional functionality that these applications can use. The fax server role allows Windows Server 2012 to run as a fax server. Since it is graphical in nature, it needs the graphical interface and cannot run on Server Core. As faxes in the modern workplace are being replaced by email, hopefully you will not need this role. Network Policy and Access Services allows the administrator to configure roles for how connections on the network should be handled. For example, a VPN server may use roles to determine who has access to the VPN and how to authenticate the user. Remote Desktop Services is used to provide desktop-like interactive services over the network. You can enable Remote Desktop on Server Core. However, this will give you the command prompt just like if you were sitting in front of the server. Since Remote Desktop Services is graphical dependent, these roles cannot be run on Server Core. Volume Application Services roles is used in large companies to activate Windows clients and servers. In a large company with a lot of clients, you should not need too many servers with this role installed. as long as all your clients can access the server in a reasonable time period. The last role is Windows Deployment Services. This is used to deploy the Windows operating system. For example, you can install Windows to computers over the network. Lastly, it should be pointed out that Server Core also supports SQL Server 2012. Previously, you were not able to run SQL on Server Core. I will now change to my Windows Server 2012 computer to see how to change from one interface to another. Currently, I am running Windows Server 2012 with the full GUI interface. To remove all or part of the graphic interfaces, I will open Server Manager from the Quick Launch bar. From Server Manager, select Manage, and then select the option Remove Roles and Features to start the Remove Roles and Features wizard. Once I am past the Welcome screen, on the next screen I need to select the server or servers that I want to make the change on. In this case, I want to remove the interface on this server, so I will leave it on the default setting and move on. On the next screen, I can decide which roles I want to remove. The GUI is a feature on the server which is on the next screen, so I won't make any changes here and move on. From Remove Features, I need to scroll down until I get to the feature User Interface and Infrastructure. There are three subcomponents here. The top one, Graphical Management Tools and Infrastructure, are all the tools like Server Manager and other tools found under Administrative Tools. If I remove this component, the server will be reduced to the Server Core interface. I want to first look at the minimal interface, so I will leave this ticked. The next component is Desktop Experience. This component adds features like what you would find if you were using a desktop computer. For example, it adds software such as Windows Media Player. If you were using this server to provide remote desktop services, you may add this role so that the users using remote desktop have an experience more like using a desktop. In most cases, servers don't need these features, but they are here if you need them. The last component, Server Graphical Shell, is the one that I'm going to remove. This component provides features like the Start menu, taskbar, and other functions such as Windows Explorer. Removing this component will effectively make the server run with the minimal interface. But as we can see, tools such as Server Manager will still work. On the next screen, all I need to do is press Remove and the component will be removed. The process does take a few minutes to complete, so I have sped up that process so we do not have to wait. Once complete, notice that there is a message stating the server needs to be restarted in order to complete removal of the feature. So I will restart the server now. The process does take some time, as not only does this require configuration changes to the server, but also the unused binaries are being removed from the system. This is done so that if any attacker were to gain access to the system, these binaries could not be used by the attacker. Even though the binaries are not being used by the operating system, to keep the system secure, it is best to remove the binaries. The process took a few minutes on this server, but I have sped up that process. Once the server has restarted and I have logged back in, a command prompt will open and also Server Manager will open. Notice that the taskbar is missing. Also, features like the Start menu are also missing. However, if I open Server Manager, I can select the option Tools. You will notice that all the normal administrative tools are available. For example, if I launch Active Directory users and computers, it will run just like it was running on a full graphics installation of Windows Server 2012. If I go to the command prompt and attempt to run Windows Explorer, notice that executable for Windows Explorer cannot be found. This is because the binaries for Windows Explorer have been removed from the system. To illustrate this better, if I go to the Program Files directory and then down to where the Internet Explorer binaries are stored, notice that the directory is completely empty. Software such as Windows Explorer and Internet Explorer have been removed from the system, so an attacker cannot use the binaries to help them attack the system, making the system more secure. I now want to change the interface to Server Core. To do this, I will go back into Server Manager and select Manage, and then select Remove Roles and Features. In the wizard, I will accept all the defaults until I get to the Features screen. On the Features screen, if I go down to User Interface and Infrastructure, the component that I need to remove is Graphical Management Tools and Infrastructure. Notice that when I untick the option, I also get prompted to remove Windows PowerShell ISE from the system. This does not remove PowerShell, but only the graphical parts of PowerShell. This component is used to provide additional features in PowerShell, like the ability to graphically debug PowerShell scripts. Once I select Remove Features and go back to the previous screen, at the top I will tick the tick box, Restart the destination server automatically if required. Once the features are removed, the server will automatically restart. This process does take a few minutes to complete, as the binaries have to be removed like before, and also the server reconfigured. I've sped up the process so we do not have to wait. Once I am logged back in, notice this time I do not have any graphical interface. All that I have is the command prompt. If I type exit and thus close the command prompt, to get it back you can press Ctrl-Alt-Delete and then select the option Task Manager. Once Task Manager is opened, select the File menu and then select the option Run New Task and then Run CMD. If you want to return back to the full GUI from Server Core, we first need to run PowerShell. From PowerShell, I need to run the command Add Windows Feature followed by the feature or features that I want to add. In this case, I want to add the features for the Server GUI shell and the GUI management tools. Once I run the command, all the binaries for the GUI will be installed and the server reconfigured. This process does take a while to complete, so I will pause the video and return once it has completed. Once complete, PowerShell will tell you that the server needs to be restarted in order for the changes to take effect. To do this, I will run the PowerShell command Restart Computer. The process of restoring the binaries does take a few minutes to complete, so once again I have sped up the process so we do not have to wait. Once the binaries have been restored and the server reconfigured, the server will boot up again with the full GUI. When I log back in, notice that the taskbar is back and with it all the other GUI functions that were removed. Unlike Windows Server 2008, you can see that it is quite easy to change between the full GUI, Server Core, and the new minimal interface. Having a graphical interface does cause the server to use more resources and can increase the attack space of the server. Previously, an administrator had to choose at install time which interface they wanted. Now with Windows Server 2012, the administrator has the choice to change the interface at any time depending on their needs. Thanks for watching this video from ITFreeTraining on the different interfaces available for Windows Server 2012. For more free videos, please see our webpage or YouTube channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.